This week on Jersey Matters, the New Jersey governor's race is now set with a big primary win by Republican Jack Ciattarelli. We'll talk with the former assemblyman about his campaign to try and unseat Governor Phil Murphy. Congressman Chris Smith wrote that the COVID-19 virus came from a Wuhan lab in China over a year ago. Now there is evidence to support his claim. An historic Asbury Park church holds its last mass to a packed house of parishioners who came to say goodbye. And we'll take a Jersey jaunt to the battleship New Jersey. Welcome to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. Republican Jack Ciattarelli easily wins this week's primary election to face off against Democratic Governor Phil Murphy in the fall. Here's my interview with the freshly crowned Republican gubernatorial nominee, former Assemblyman Jack Ciattarelli. Thanks for joining us today, Assemblyman. And first off, congratulations. Let's get away from the politics for a second. You've been running for 5 years. How did you and your family celebrate?
We went home, just kind of sat down and talked about things, Larry, but the evening went up until almost midnight. So when we got home, it wasn't too much talk. We went right to bed.
How did it feel for you?
Well, it felt great, Larry, but listen, we worked extremely hard over the past 16 months during all the time that I've been an official candidate, and we reached the maximum amount of fundraising with the $7.5 million. We felt very confidently that we were going to win and we were going to be right around 50%. So in a lot of ways, you're just very, very happy with the outcome. But in a lot of ways, it's exactly what I expected.
Yeah, there was so much talk that it was close. Some people were saying you're behind in the polls. You won by a pretty big margins. So I think that sent a message to a lot of people about your campaign and about how you reacted to some competition. I understand that you got a phone call from the governor. How did that go?
I received a text from the governor saying, "See you on the campaign trail." And I said, "You bet, Phil, looking forward to it."
So let's talk about the campaign now against the governor that you've been getting ready for some time. What will the tone of the campaign be? What are you going after on his record?
We're certainly going to talk about taxes, Larry. No state has the tax burden that New Jersey has. In fact, a recent National Accounting Journal says that New Jerseyans over their lifetime pay more in taxes, nearly 50% of their income, more in taxes than any other state. And the even worse news is states 49, 48, 47, right through 43 are not even close. New Jersey pays hundreds of thousands of dollars more in taxes over their lifetime than the residents of any other state.
You know, we have an interview coming up with Ashley Koenig from the Rutgers Eagleton poll, and she did the approval numbers for Phil Murphy. And he's still hovering over 50%. He's dropped a lot, but he's still hovering over 50%. The interesting thing is when it comes to taxes, only 7% approve of what he's doing. And I thought that was the number one issue. So I was wondering how he hovers above 50% if he's only at 7% approval on taxes. Can you explain that?
I think a lot of people are still looking at the governor in terms of his handling of the pandemic. And but at the same time, this is what a gubernatorial campaign is really all about. So for the next 5 months, we're going to put the spotlight over his handling of the pandemic because we do think he's failed us in nursing homes on Main Street and with our public schools. But at the same time, Larry, it's always been about taxes, property taxes in particular. And on that issue, his record is abysmal. It's a failure.
So that's number one for you, going after him on taxes. Is it because you believe by November the pandemic will be in our rearview mirror?
I believe it's already in the rearview mirror in some ways, Larry, but that doesn't mean, for example, that people are going to forget or we're going to let them forget what's happened in our nursing homes, on Main Street, and with our schools. His record during the pandemic is a failure in those respects.
It's interesting that you went through a Republican primary and you were blasted by some Republicans for not embracing Donald Trump enough. Now you're going to go up against Phil Murphy, who calls you a Trump Republican. You can't win in this.
You know what that tells me, Larry? I'm right where I need to be. I was true to myself all through this primary. I didn't do the old pivot one way to win the primary, pivot another to win a general. I've been true to myself. One thing that the people of New Jersey don't like is BS, and I've never been BS.
A lot is made about what you're going to do or what any candidate's going to do, especially when they run for an executive office on their first day. Do you have a plan for your first day should you win?
You bet I do. We need a new school funding formula. That's why taxes, property taxes, are out of control in this state. So job number one is a new school funding formula, and it'll be reflected in my first budget, which will take effect on July 1st. And the second thing is changes to our tax code to make New Jersey a better place to do business. New Jersey has the worst business climate in the nation. No one wants to start a business here. Businesses are leaving every single week. We've got to make New Jersey a better place to do business, to create the jobs that people are looking for. That's job one and job two.
To do that, you need allies in the legislature, in the assembly, and in the Senate. Do you feel like you have them?
Well, first of all, we're going to have a Republican majority, Larry. I shouldn't be seeking the nomination unless I believe that. But if by chance it's a Democratic majority, I've always had a good working relationship with the Democratic leadership because they've always known that I'm about the policy. The answer is in the policy. Let's put the right policies in place here in New Jersey. And one other thing, I love competition. Let's have a competition. But the day after the election, it's time to govern, and I will do so in the best interest of all New Jerseyans.
Have you thought about a lieutenant governor yet?
You bet I have.
And?
You're on the short list, Larry, but I'll be releasing that.
I talked to you once before about this, and I know that one of the things that you're pushing is that we should have a more business-friendly New Jersey. Are business leaders on your list, near the top of your list?
They certainly are. So, but I'm excited in the coming weeks. In the coming days, I'll be announcing the new state chair here for New Jersey. And right behind that will be who my lieutenant governor will be. And again, I'm excited for New Jersey. This is going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to be a great competition. And I'm confident it's going to work out well for Jack Ciattarelli and the Republican Party come November.
Oh, your ads were wonderful during the primary, especially the ones introducing you again to people in New Jersey. Are you running them again, or do you have new ads coming?
We'll have new ads coming, but the themes will be very much the same. It's all about these Main Street issues here in New Jersey, pocketbook issues, kitchen table issues, and just reminding everybody that Jack's a real Jersey guy.
Best of luck to you, sir. I really appreciate you talking to me. You may be the politician who's been on this show the most, so it doesn't surprise me. I think that people saw the numbers for our online poll before you came on. It doesn't surprise me that you're getting the support of Jersey Matters viewers. Thanks again. Republican candidate for governor, Jack Ciattarelli. Coming up next, Ciattarelli is already far behind in his campaign to try and unseat Governor Murphy. That's according to a new Rutgers-Eagleton poll. We'll talk to pollster Ashley Koenig next. Welcome back to Jersey Matters. In a way too early poll, Governor Phil Murphy has a commanding lead already over Republican Jack Ciattarelli with over twice the support. We spoke with Ashley Koenig, director of the Eagleton Center for Public Interest Polling, about the latest Rutgers-Eagleton poll. Ashley, as always, thanks so much for joining us. Congratulations, you were the first ones out, it seems, with a head-to-head between Jack Ciattarelli and Phil Murphy, the first poll out. Tell us what it said.
So this is informative, right? We are several months away from an election. At the time of fielding, we didn't even know if Ciattarelli was actually going to be the Republican nominee, but let's have some fun and let's see hypothetically where the election would be today. When we did this, we actually did it in two different ways. We talked about Phil Murphy just being reelected, if you would definitely reelect him, if you would consider voting for somebody else, or if you would definitely vote for somebody else. And we see that Murphy has a lead in this instance against an ambiguous other candidate, against an ambiguous opponent. And so when we add Ciattarelli's name to that, we actually see his lead increase even more. 52% of registered voters say that they would vote for Phil Murphy, 26% for Jack Ciattarelli. Independents and Democrats obviously siding with Murphy, Republicans siding with Ciattarelli, but Ciattarelli not especially as likely as Phil Murphy to shore up that party-based support as much as Phil Murphy does.
There's a big asterisk, though, and you mentioned it. And when you said we had a little fun with this, there's a big asterisk because he had not even won the Republican primary yet. And so Republicans were split at that point. As we know, the other candidates got as many votes as he did. And so now you would believe that the Republican Party would coalesce little bit. And a lot of people still, even though he's been around for a while, don't know who Jack Ciattarelli is. And I'm certain the advertising is going to come out introducing himself and attacking Phil Murphy. So as you pointed out, this is way early. You don't expect people to take this too seriously. It's just a snapshot in time, right?
That is perfect. You get an A+ in survey research class because a snapshot in time is the perfect way to describe it. In fact, polls are not meant to be predictors. Let's reflect on that, especially as we're heading to yet another election cycle in New Jersey. This is simply to understand the electorate and the ideological mood and policy views of the electorate. This is not meant to predict a race. But certainly now is the time for Ciattarelli to beef up that name recognition, because as we saw from our latest poll, about 75% of New Jerseyans have no opinion on him, or they don't know who he is. 50% specifically say they do not know who Jack Ciattarelli is. And this is a really large name recognition deficit, much larger, almost twice as large as what Murphy faced when he was running his first time around.
And so he has an opportunity to introduce himself. What about Phil Murphy? And this might be more relevant. His favorability rating, his job approval rating. What did you see there?
So we definitely saw some easement from the skyrocketing highs we saw during the pandemic, especially from April. We slipped a few points in October, and now we slipped a few more points. But hey, these are solid ratings that any politician would want to have, especially when dealing with an ongoing crisis with difficult decision making ahead as a pandemic eases. Or hopefully slows down, and especially leading into an election year. 47% of New Jerseyans say they're currently favorable toward Governor Murphy right now, 36% unfavorable. His job approval even higher at 55% approve and 40% disapprove.
But as you mentioned, it used to be much higher. Should we read anything into that it was so high and now it's going down? Does that show a trajectory or not?
I mean, yes, there's a trajectory, but this is just simple rally around the flag effect. We saw this with President Bush back during 9/11. We certainly saw this in our own home state with Governor Christie back during Hurricane Sandy. We saw huge double-digit drops between Hurricane Sandy and re-election, and then when Bridgegate had hit following his landslide re-election. So this is normal. This is back regressing to the mean. Phil Murphy's numbers have always kind of been middle of the road, stronger than some other governors in the past, but always kind of middle of the pack around the 50% range. So these are really solid ratings heading into an election. When we look at different issues, though, we see that he is incredibly strong when we give him a report card on the COVID pandemic. But of course, his least popular issue, where he is least popular, receives the lowest marks, unsurprisingly, taxes. This is the number one issue perennially in the state for New Jerseyans, taxes, especially property taxes. Just 7% give Murphy an A on taxes, 31% give him an F.
Let's get on to some other things, because I'm certain you're going to do another poll on the race, and we're looking forward to hearing about that. But you just recently did a poll on COVID-19 and vaccinations. What did you find?
We found about 1 in 6 New Jerseyans say they probably or definitely will not get the vaccine. Actually, Governor Murphy just released new numbers that about 72% have at least one dose. And that's what our poll found. About 75%, 3/4 have said that they received the first dose of the vaccine. Among those remaining, over half of the currently unvaccinated say they definitely or probably won't get it. And among that group, half of those say there's nothing that will make them get it. No beer, no wine, no beach state pass. Absolutely nothing will convince them.
Now, you also polled several different issues when it comes to COVID-19. What were some of the surprising ones to you?
I think there's some really strong support in terms of getting back to normal, whether we're talking about fully reopening public schools, support that we see both among parents and those who are not parents within New Jersey, back to that in-person instruction, and also pretty solid support, whether we're talking strongly or somewhat support when it comes to healthcare workers being required to be vaccinated, when it comes to colleges and universities, Rutgers being the first in the nation to declare this, having their students required to be vaccinated to remain or attend campus, as well as having some kind of vaccine passport and having any employer require their employees to be vaccinated. So some pretty solid support there as we move forward in life, as well as pretty decent levels of comfort with doing everyday things, whether it's especially attending things outdoors, especially attending things with people who are vaccinated, and especially going to retail stores, going to the barbershop, the hair salon, things that we've started to do more and more now that rates are dropping in terms of infections, hospitalizations, and deaths.
As always, thank you for your time. You're wonderful on television. Ashley Koenig of the Rutgers-Eagleton poll. Still to come.
Ever hear of a real-life fairy godmother? We'll introduce you to a woman who's being recognized as just that here in New Jersey. Coming up next on Jersey Matters.
Congratulations to Jersey Matters' Kimberly Kravitz for receiving the Rising Star Award at the Stars of Women in Business event earlier this week in Red Bank. Hundreds attended the event to celebrate women in the workplace. And now a story of women helping women. A New Jersey woman raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to help women struggling in the pandemic, even though she was financially struggling herself. Rising star Kimberly Kravitz makes the introduction. Kimberly.
Many people over the last year and a half have endured some real tough financial times and have been desperate for help, including the woman I'm about to introduce you to, who is now being recognized as a fairy godmother, waving her magic wand around America.
I just got tired of getting the door slammed.
It was a chain reaction. Finally, a few women helped Gordon, a single mother, nursing school student, and parent to an autistic boy. And with that, she decided it was time to step in and pay it forward.
And business owners, people who are self-employed, people are hungry.
Gordon has raised over $150,000 since the pandemic started, all while scrambling to keep up with her own bills and take care of her nonverbal son.
Right now, we helped over 121 families. You don't always have to have money to help people, but there's ways to give back.
And it's all done through social media. Gordon has since parlayed her Instagram account into a registered nonprofit.
We gathered 50 volunteers across the United States, and we explained that there are a lot of marginalized families who need us.
But it started small.
Who has 10? Who has $20?
Gordon has done more than fundraising for food and toiletries. She's also saved families from losing their home.
Me and my family was on the verge of losing our home and being on the streets, like days away from it. And a complete stranger that I've never had the pleasure of meeting face-to-face before stepped in and saved us.
She put me through college. I'm in college now. I'm in my second semester. This has been my foundation to be able to give back to the community, pay it forward, and do other things like that. It's been passed down even to my 6-year-old son. He has been inspired in everything as well by Miss Simone.
We've had a family who was looking at foreclosure. In a matter of 3 days, we got the call on a Tuesday. There was going to be kicked out by Friday. We made a few calls, posted a PayPal fundraiser to social media, and we raised about $5,000 in 12 hours.
It could take days or weeks for federal COVID relief or unemployment to kick in, but she will do anything she can to help one particular group of people.
My number one priority is marginalized women, because we are the ones who experience the most trauma. We are the ones that it takes us a long time to get back on our feet.
But there is a vetting process.
So the application process, we have a form on our website that goes directly kind of breaks down what kind of need that you need, whether it be groceries, whether it be rental assistance, bills paid, and then we have applicants submit legal documents to just go through this vetting process, and then Simone herself will look through the applications and really help these families in need.
What would you have been able to do without social media? Could any of this been done?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think social media is a powerful tool, but sometimes we don't know how to use it.
So if you or somebody you know would like to volunteer their time and join the cause, you can log on to the website, theblackfairygodmother.org. Reporting from North Bergen for Jersey Matters, I'm Kimberly Kravitz.
All right, thank you, Kimberly. Still to come on Jersey Matters.
The Roman Catholic Church you see behind me has been in Asbury Park since 1910, but it's now closing its doors. Hear the reaction from the community next.
Welcome back. It is the oldest church in the Trenton Catholic Diocese. Holy Spirit, the Gothic-style brick church with amazing stained glass windows, was built in the late 1800s by German and Irish immigrants, and now it's closing. Our Jennifer Marin was there as parishioners came to say goodbye. Jennifer.
After over 100 years of service to the Catholic community in Asbury Park, the Holy Spirit Church is closing its doors. And as parishioners gathered for the final Mass, emotions were running high.
It's like coming to a funeral because this church been a house for us, a home for us.
One by one, parishioners made their way inside Holy Spirit Church in Asbury Park for one final Mass.
It's very difficult for me today. There was no way I was not coming to say goodbye to my beloved parish.
Back in October, church officials informed parishioners that the Roman Catholic Church would be closing and the building would be sold. Irene and Robert Burney, who were active members of the church for decades and had contributed donations for previous extensive renovations, say they felt blindsided by the decision.
We weren't even given a vote, and there was no discussion or anything on Holy Spirit.
However, according to the church, the Parish Finance Council and a special subcommittee looked for ways to keep the church open and kept parishioners informed of the financials throughout. Back in 2014, Holy Spirit combined with Our Lady of Mount Carmel Church, also in Asbury Park, to form Mother of Mercy Parish. For years, the parish struggled to keep both houses of worship open, but ultimately decided that they couldn't afford to keep both.
There's a change in the world, in our country, when the churches are closing.
Church officials say the sale of the property will help the parish pay all its debt and pay for renovations at the remaining Our Lady of Mount Carmel Church. According to Elizabeth Spurrier, the real estate agent in charge of selling Holy Spirit, the church was purchased by JLD Investment Group. She stressed that the buyers signed a contract that will prevent them from tearing Holy Spirit down. They plan to renovate the property and create 7 condominiums while maintaining the integrity of the church.
It's like a knife to my heart. I don't see what the reason to have this place break down for other things because of the money. I don't know. I don't understand this. Money is more value than us, more value than our faith. This is really ridiculous, and I'm very in pain.
The church insists that they didn't want to close Holy Spirit, but that the aging building needed upgrades and they couldn't afford to maintain it. They also say keeping the Our Lady of Mount Carmel Church open instead was important because it houses the Our Lady of Mount Carmel School, which is a vital part of the Catholic community. Although many parishioners were upset by the news, others feel at peace with the decision.
I was sad, but I understand it costs a great deal to support this church.
It is sad to see it go, but it's also, part of my history, my past, and I have so many great memories of the friends and people I met through this church.
According to reports, now that the Holy Spirit Church is closing, the parish plans to consolidate 7 masses in Mount Carmel Church, 3 in English, 3 in Spanish, and 1 in Creole. For now, reporting in Asbury Park, for Jersey Matters, I'm Jennifer Marin.
Welcome back to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. There is brand new evidence that the COVID-19 pandemic started in a lab in Wuhan, China, despite the Chinese government's denials. New Jersey Republican Congressman Chris Smith has been saying there needs to be an investigation at the Wuhan Institute of Virology for over a year now. Congressman, as always, thanks so much for giving us your time today. I thought of you immediately when I heard about Wuhan being in the news again. You've been on this for a long time. Do you have any doubt in your mind? Do you believe that this started in the Wuhan lab?
Larry, I think the evidence is so overwhelming. And matter of fact, the fact that so many people in the news media, because President Trump suggested this and asserted this, immediately defaulted to that it can't be true, did a grave disservice to the lives and well-being of hundreds of thousands of people. Had we been very clear, and if the world was united back in more than a year ago in January, February, March, as to the origins, which I believe was in the Wuhan lab, we might have gotten to how better to mitigate its damage that much faster. But unfortunately, it was cover up for all these months. I even introduced a bill, Larry, that in April, not of this year, of a year ago, that would empower Americans to sue the government of China for monetary damages for personal injury or death or damage or loss of property as a result of a willful or grossly negligent misrepresentation of information to the World Health Organization. Xi Jinping, the dictator of China, lies for a living. He does it on all things, whether it be the genocide that's unfolding in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, or all the other human rights abuses. He does not tell the truth.
So mistakes were made in the past by this country in not going after the Wuhan lab aggressively enough. What can be done now?
Well, I think there needs to be a top to bottom review of all of these infectious diseases, who we collaborate with. Remember anthrax, which took cutaneous anthrax, impacted people in my district, in Hamilton Township, killed some people at Brentwood, which is in Washington, from anthrax. And that, we believe, came out of our own lab by a disgruntled individual. We've got to look so carefully at all of these infectious diseases. And when you collaborate with the Chinese Communist Party, you're opening the door for enormous amounts of potential pain and suffering, and in this case, a pandemic. So I think we need to bar that, deal with governments where there is protocols are in place to protect any kind of release of an infectious disease. We need to study them in order to come up with better strategies for curing and also mitigating their spread. But dealing with a Chinese dictatorship, the Chinese Communist Party seems to have been, from the get-go, a very misguided misadventure.
It does call into question how much influence China has over this country.
Yes,
because it seemed like immediately it was called a conspiracy. It was poo-pooed in the media.
Right.
Politicians were out in front of it saying that's ridiculous. It never happened. Is that Chinese influence, or is that just they made a mistake?
No, I think it's Chinese influence on steroids. They have been enormously effective in co-opting our business community, our major sports teams, including the NBA, who want to make large amounts of money in the market that is there in China. And they're willing to look askance, look the other way when it comes to gross violations of human rights. And in this case, a situation that has killed, almost 600,000 Americans, just an enormous loss of life. And in New Jersey alone, it's over 26,000. It's not the Chinese people with whom we have an argument. It is the Chinese Communist Party that is very malevolent and does horrible things to its own people and, of course, the people outside of its borders.
Will we ever get to the bottom of this? Because I would think that finding the source of a pandemic that killed 600,000 Americans, or will kill 600,000 Americans if things keep going the way they are, I would think that would be a bipartisan issue that everyone would want to know the answer to that.
You would think. And there are some bipartisan members who, members of both sides of the aisle who want it. But for a long time, those of us who asserted that this came out of the Wuhan laboratory were scoffed at, laughed at, bewildered, belittled. When I wrote my op-ed for the Asbury Park Press, which was also run in the Washington Times, you should have seen some of the backlash of people who thought I was picking on the Chinese government. Well, let's always differentiate. It's the Chinese Communist Party who have a malign influence on the world and a horrific influence and record on their own people.
And we also found out that there are brave and people with good conscience in that laboratory. Or we
Absolutely.
wouldn't have known about it in the first place. So it's still worth an investigation.
And some of those who were whistleblowers, and maybe as many as 3 who got sick themselves, you know, cover up only lasts for a season unless it is enabled by people like in our own government and our own. So Dr. Fauci does have a lot of accounting to do. In my opinion, a lot of answers that remain unanswered, questions that need to be posed. What were we as American taxpayers doing, aiding and abetting a Chinese Communist Party's laboratory called the Wuhan Laboratory?
I will point out, because you didn't, and maybe it's because that you were being humble, that op-ed you wrote was April of last year about the Wuhan laboratory. And so you've been on this from the beginning. I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much, Godmother. New Jersey Republican Congressman Chris Smith. Still to come on Jersey Matters, investigators have been working tirelessly to find a little girl who was abducted from a park in Bridgeton over a year and a half ago. We'll get an update from the Cumberland County prosecutor next. The Edna Mahan Women's Facility in Clinton that has been plagued by sexual violence is closing. Governor Murphy announced his intention to shut down the infamous Hunterdon County Prison, the only women's prison in the state, and relocate inmates to a new facility. The Edna Mahan Women's Facility first opened in 1913. And now the latest on the search for Dulce Alavez, who was 5 years old when she was abducted from a park in Bridgeton in September of 2019. Here is Cumberland County Prosecutor Jennifer Webb McCrae with an update. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a year and a half now that, more than a year and a half, that 5-year-old Dulce Alavez disappeared from a park in Bridgeton. Where are you with the case now? Have you received new evidence over the last few months?
Since Dulce's disappearance in September of 2019, it certainly has rocked our community. And what I want the community to know is that this is an ongoing and active investigation. I have said many times, in the absence of evidence that Dulce is no longer with us, I am very hopeful, and investigators remain very hopeful that Dulce is alive. Although I can't talk about the details because it is an ongoing active criminal investigation, I want the public to know that even as of today, there are things going on in this case to still locate Dulce and to determine those who are responsible for her disappearance. We're very lucky to have had the help of the FBI, as well as the New Jersey State Police Missing Persons Unit, and investigators continue to, we get tips and to comb over information, because I always describe this like a huge puzzle piece. And what I want the public to understand is that there may be a piece that they're aware of or something suspicious. And this is not only in Cumberland County, across the nation, and really into Mexico, that might be the missing piece that we need to crack this case wide open.
I know that you heard the 2 words that every county prosecutor prays they never hear, and that's a mass shooting. Could you tell us about the investigation into that?
That too is an active, ongoing investigation. Another case that we don't want the public to forget about. A case that has rocked our community and the safety and security that we feel. And I want your listeners and our community to understand that we need the public's help to solve that case as well. We understand that people, may be concerned about their safety. So we've given them a way to give us tips anonymously. www.njcCPO.org/tips. Finally, the state police has provided a website where if anyone has video or pictures of who was there that evening, because we know that there were hundreds of people at that house party. They can send that information to njsp.org/shooting. And that too can be totally anonymous. What I've said publicly about that case is we will not stop until we find who is responsible for, and the indicators are that there are multiple people responsible for the shootings that evening. We are tracking down every witness that may have been there at any time to put together all of the circumstances that we believe will help us bring those who are responsible for the shootings and the 3 tragic deaths that we had to justice.
And what's important, and if you have pointed out a couple of times, but we should remind people, all of that would be done anonymously, so they have nothing to fear of in coming forward.
Absolutely.
Before we wrap this up, are there any other cases that you want to ask the public's help about?
Yes, we had a very tragic death that occurred earlier this month on June 4th. A young man, victim Mario Soriano, age 28, tragically lost his life. Another shooting death in the city of Bridgeton. And David Morales Almeida was charged in that matter. And we are looking for him with the help of the U.S. Marshal. So we're asking anyone with information on that case to also provide that information to us. They can call the Bridgeton Police Department. That number is 856-451-0033.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. Cumberland County Prosecutor Jennifer Webb McCrae. Still to come on Jersey Matters, this week's Jersey Jaunt takes us aboard the battleship New Jersey. All aboard next.
We had a spectacular celestial event unfold through the New Jersey skies just a couple days ago, and it was just a magnificent event. Okay, we had our solar eclipse, the annular solar eclipse, where 72% of the sun was covered by the moon. I want to thank Chris Bakley from North Wildwood for sending us that picture. Maybe you got to see it, maybe you didn't, and that was the first time you saw it, but still spectacular nonetheless. All right, so it's going to be a bit cooler over the next 10 days. We have some small shower and thunderstorm chances, but nothing just jumps out at me as any severe weather event or widespread rainmaker. So that's good, and we also don't have any more heat waves in sight because it's going to be on the cooler side. Our Futurecast satellite radar is going to show you some spotty showers and storms, but that's it. Generally, throughout the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, it's going to be a calm week ahead, and you can see that right here. All right, temperatures around average, upper 80s on Monday. By the end of the week, a little cooler. Have yourselves a wonderful weekend, everybody.
Welcome back to Jersey Matters. This week's Jersey Jaunt takes us to Camden and the battleship New Jersey. Launched on the first anniversary of Pearl Harbor, the battleship New Jersey traveled more miles, fought in more battles, and launched more shells than any warship in U.S. history.
If you go to a normal museum, the artifacts are in glass cases. But when you come out to Battleship New Jersey, you are literally getting to go inside of the artifact. The battleship here, a World War II era Iowa-class battleship, is our primary artifact. So you get to touch it, you get to go inside of it, you get to experience what life was like for the 2,000 plus sailors who lived on board her at any given time.
So I served on this ship back in '55. I was a gunner's mate. And a gunner's mate is I was barely 21. And a gunner's mate's a gun mechanic. And that's what I did on here.
She's actually the most decorated battleship that was ever built. She earned 19 battle stars for service through World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the later years of the Cold War, where she served during the Lebanese Civil War and even sailed into the Persian Gulf during the Iran-Iraq War.
Oh, that's true. This is a veteran of 4 major engagements, Second World War not the least, and she played a really big part in the Second World War out in the Pacific.
Yes, this is the most decorated battleship that we have in the U.S. Navy, and and because of that, it's a special privilege to be here, especially with those 4 commissionings during the World War II, during the Korean War, during Vietnam, and also during the 1980s period.
As a memorial, we host all sorts of different veterans events on board. We have veterans who continue to serve on board as volunteers. We host events during various veterans holidays like Veterans Day and Memorial Day. When you come out and visit us, usually on Saturdays, we have members of the ship's volunteer gun crew on board. And if you make a donation to the museum, you can fire different sized guns. For $50, you can fire a 2-pounder saluting gun, just a blank charge.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire!
And for $500, you can fire one of the ship's 5-inch dual-purpose guns, which are the ones you see behind me along the sides of the ship. If you notice, on top of the ship's tripod mast, our air search radar is rotating again. That just started at the beginning of May, so if you've been on board the ship before, it's something new to see when you come out this time. If you're interested in coming out and visiting the ship, an adult ticket costs about $25. It's significantly less for children. And there's also a membership program. If you buy a family membership, it ends up being cheaper than it would be to buy every member of your family a ticket. We are open every day from 11 until 4. 4 is when we stop selling tickets. If you come at 4, you still get another 2 hours to visit the ship. And it usually takes an average family about 2 or 3 hours to see the whole vessel.
Our visit to the battleship New Jersey was produced, shot, and edited by Phil Andrews. My commentary is next. When President Joe Biden put Vice President Kamala Harris in charge of the crisis at the southern border, I don't think she knew what she was getting into. It is a no-win job unless President Biden is willing to undo his executive orders that allowed more people to cross the border, which he has no intention of doing. So how do you fix a problem if the most obvious solution is off the table? In May, over 180,000 people were apprehended at the southern border, and that number just keeps going up. The 3-month average now is the highest in almost 3 decades, and this doesn't count the people who weren't apprehended, the people who got through. And the number of unaccompanied children being left at the border because of Biden's executive order that they all get through is just heartbreaking, as witnessed by this video of a 5-year-old crying for his mommy after being left at the border. Again, just heartbreaking. But instead of dealing with the problem at the border, Vice President Kamala Harris traveled to Guatemala to meet with Guatemalan President Alejandro Giammattei because many, including children, are traveling the 1,500 miles from that country to the American border, but the meeting didn't go as planned. Giammattei told Kamala Harris that President Biden's message that he would not turn away unaccompanied children at the border has been used by the coyotes to convince families to allow them, for money, to take their children to America. But the coyotes also work for the cartels.
So a huge wave of migrant unaccompanied children starts. That's a matter of concern because as soon as they cross the border between Mexico and the U.S., they fall into the hands of cartels, prostitution networks, and so on.
So according to the president of Guatemala, coyotes are using President Biden's message that unaccompanied children can cross the border and get into America to convince those families to pay them so they can take the children and deliver them to the cartels for human trafficking. We wouldn't have known that was the case if it wasn't for Vice President Kamala Harris's trip. You see, when she goes, a contingent of American journalists go too, looking for stories. And Harris is getting it from all sides. Republicans and conservatives are upset at the administration's policies that allow more to cross the border illegally. And because of that, the vice president said at a news conference in Guatemala this to those who were thinking about making the trip.
Do not come. Do not come. The United States will continue to enforce our laws and secure our border.
But that comment didn't go over well with progressives in her own party.
It's wrong and it's inhumane.
From Guatemala, the vice president then visited Mexico, where the Mexican president has also criticized President Biden for the problems at the border.
Expectations were created that with the government of President Biden, there would be a better treatment of migrants. And this has caused Central American migrants, and also from our country, wanting to cross the border, thinking that it is easier to do so.
Nothing concrete came from the trip. Yes, there was a memorandum of agreement between the United States and Mexico to stop human trafficking, but it was mostly ceremonial. Vice President Harris and the President of Mexico didn't even sign it. They observed the signing of the agreement that has no teeth. So the Vice President, to fix the problem at the border, went to Guatemala and then Mexico and skipped the border.
Okay. Do you have any plans to visit the border?
I'm here in Guatemala today. At some point, we are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making.
I didn't go to Europe? Really? Let me try to succinctly make the point that the vice president is searching for. You were put in charge of the crisis at the border, and you haven't been to the border to talk to the people most affected. That's the point. Even Democrats are admitting that the trip was a flop and may haunt Kamala Harris for some time. But you have to give it to Teflon Joe Biden. He is a crafty politician. He knows there's a crisis at the border, so his solution: send Vice President Kamala Harris, put her in charge. Let her take the blame. I'm Larry Menti. We'll talk again soon.